Okay, hey there, it's Justin again, Fully Live Athlete Pastor Channel. We're on day 45 of the online Bible reading club. Today we're going to be looking at two chapters in the Old Testament, Leviticus 15 and 16, and then we're going to be turning to the New Testament, Matthew 27, 1 through 26. And I want to give you guys a heads up here. I almost decided to just kind of breeze through 15, and I'll give you a few minutes on that. But the 15 is about the discharges from man or woman's genitals. And it's it's like sex-related discharges, right? And they could be either from sex or even through STDs. So regular discharges or irregular ones. But the point is that when you had these discharges, you would be unclean, and then you have to go through a cleansing process in order to engage in the worship of Israel. So as you think about that, unclean didn't mean sinful necessarily. It just means you have to be set apart. You have to be set apart to get into the presence of God. Well, why do you think? I almost breeze through these because it's very similar to content we've covered in previous days in the Holiness Code here. But why put this right before Leviticus 16? Leviticus 16 is a kind of a landmark chapter in Leviticus, as it's the Day of Atonement or Yom Kippur passage, right? It's the big instruction about how Aaron's supposed to, and perpetually priest in the future are supposed to make atonement for the sins of the people. And so I consider why you put it there. And so one way that people in the ancient Near Eastern world imagined how they could make atonement for sin and get favor from the gods is to have sex with these temple prostitutes. And we know the Bible teaches that sex is intended for a man and a woman in marriage, but the ancient Near Eastern world would use it to, he'd have a worshiper and a prostitute, and you would cultivate fertility and blessings through engaging in these ritualistic sex practices. And so God's people, though, would be excluded from this. They're a holy people. They're set apart. So I think it's very fitting that this chapter precedes the major chapter of how atonement is made, because of contrast. How absurd these guys are in thinking in those terms, that we can affect God's will and bend His will through our practices. We can't. God's sovereign, and we are His creatures, and it's by grace that He brings us into a renewed relationship with Him by making blood atonement. Well, let's get into the big chapter here, Leviticus 16. If you look at 16, I'm going to kind of run through this whole process that Aaron was supposed to do. Now, if you look at the first couple verses, it says that Moses was instructed after the death of Nadab and Abihu, Aaron's sons. You go back to Leviticus 10 to see that. And it's a devastating time where they offered unauthorized worship, and because of that, God's presence consumed them and killed them, and it was an awful tragedy for Aaron. So Aaron's going to be instructed on how is it appropriate to come into the presence of God. How is that supposed to work? Well, so when you do this, here's one time a year you're going to go into the presence of the Lord, and so here's how it's going to work. Okay, Aaron or whoever's coming after you, bathe your body, put on the special clothes, both outer and inner, the priestly garments, and you're going to bring a bull and a ram. The bull is for the sin offering to atone for yourself and your own household. The priest is not sinless. He has to make atonement for himself. So before he goes in, he's got to put on the special clothes and then use the bull to make a sin offering for himself. He's going to bring the ram in for the burnt offering, and then he's going to have 2 goats he's going to also bring. So 4 animals so far. You've got one that's going to be the scapegoat or the Azazel offering, and so it's not going to be killed. And then one's going to be a sin offering. And so pause on the sin offering. He's going to take the scapegoat and send it away. But and then he's going to, once he enters in, after making atonement for himself and his own household, he's going to burn some incense in the authorized way inside the veil. He's going to bring that in to cover the mercy seat. It says in verse 13, lest he die. So he's going to shield the mercy seat through the use of the incense, so he doesn't see the presence of the glory of the Lord and die. So that's an interesting point there. He's going to sprinkle blood, and I think this is a very interesting detail. It says on the east side of the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant. So why would he even include this like geographical marker there on the east side? Wouldn't it be just as good on the west side, like why, or the north side, or the south side? Why east side? Well, if you go back to Genesis 3, when the first parents are ejected from the presence of God, they are barred from access to the tree of life after their sin. They move out to the east, and you see that's the trajectory of the fall. And so what's going to happen is God's going to place an angel with a flaming sword to guard the way back to the tree of life. And the people of God are unable to move to move back in the presence of God. So what's going to happen is somebody's going to have to come from the east, take on our flesh, take on our role, be the true priest, and make blood atonement at that mercy seat, keep the covenant, and bring us back into the presence of God, bring us to the presence of God. That's the good news of the gospel, and it's foreshadowed by that one little detail by the east side. So the priest Aaron and others are going to sprinkle the blood at the east side, because that's where the pathway that Christ is going to return through the fall back into the grace of the Lord, in the glory of the Lord. So fascinating point. I mean, like there's no lost details here. That has to be significant, and I think that's got to be the reason, because that's the way of ejection. That's going to be the way of return, is through the flaming sword of the east, to the east side of the presence of God. All right, so in 15, you're going to bring the second goat, the sin offering for the people, and it's going to be sprinkled and burnt up, and that's going to be the sin offering. Atonement's going to be made for the people. And you're going to sprinkle 7 times. There's another 7 times reference there, the number of perfection and completion. 7 times you sprinkle. And then when the blood is sprinkled on all the instruments and on account of the people's sin and uncleanness, and you see that in verse 19. It's got the whole thing inside the tabernacle. All the instruments have to be purified, because we are created, but we are also sinful. That's the issue, is that because of our sin and uncleanness, even the instruments of worship have to be set apart. And then after he returns out from the midst of the presence of God and has purified everything, he's going to put his hands on the scapegoat, the second goat, after he's casted lots for him to determine which goat's which, and he's going to confess the sins, and then they're going to have people that are going to take the goat out of the camp and remove it way on out there, so the goat could never get back and leave him behind. Fascinating stuff. You should look up some information if you're curious about this ritual of the scapegoat. And that's obviously a connection to Christ, who is going to become our scapegoat. He's going to remove our sins away from us as far as the east is from the west. He's going to take on the sins upon him, and they're going to be transferred from us to him, and he's going to pay the price for them. Then once Aaron goes in the tent of meeting, he removes his special clothing. He bathes himself. Anyone who's been engaged in the scapegoat part of it has to return back. Before they can return back to the camp, they have to bathe and be purified again to get back into the camp. And that's the way it goes. So after they come out, burn the offering, they burn it for the sins of the people. In verse 24, they make atonement. Aaron makes atonement for himself and his people. They're going to burn up all the carcass and take it outside of the camp, burn up everything that's left over from it, and those that handle it are, of course, going to have to be cleansed again. And then you see verse 32 through 34 that it needs to be a perpetual thing, an infinitely ongoing into the future thing, an abiding forever ritual. Okay, but we don't do that anymore. Why? Well, go to Matthew 27. We see a scapegoat situation. We see Pilate, who is convinced, Pilate and his wife are convinced that Jesus is not guilty. And so he's going to try everything he can to get Jesus free, because he doesn't think that this is just, right? but he's going to ultimately bend to the will of the people. Well, who do the people want? Those really those people that hate Jesus. The religious leaders have incited a mob here against Jesus, and so Pilate has this. Roman government has this plan where they give away one pardon, and so they're gonna put Jesus up against Barabbas, who is horrible, and so Pilate's plan is that they're ultimately going to pick Jesus to take him and put him back out on the streets, because who wants this guy Barabbas out on the streets terrorizing people, right? Well, the mob is so dead set on killing Jesus that they say crucify him, and they scream crucify him. And so Pilate says, hey, this is what you want, this is what you're going to get. And they he turns over Jesus to be scourged and prepared for crucifixion. That's how the text ends. Well, isn't that interesting? We end up with Leviticus 16, the scapegoat. You've got two goats by lots. One is chosen to be the scapegoat. One's chosen to be killed for the sins and make atonement. So there's two images there of the bloodshed and the removal of sin. And Jesus is going to become both what's called in theology the propitiation for our sins. In Romans 3:24 and 25, you'll see that word there, and also in 1 John twice. But propitiation for our sins, meaning the satisfaction of God's wrath. He's going to spill his blood for us. And then also he's going to be the expiation for our sins. He's going to remove the guilt from us through what he's going to do so that we may enter into the presence of the Lord. And we don't have Yom Kippur anymore. We don't have Day of Atonement anymore. There's no need for it. It'd be a sin to do it, because what it was picturing has been fulfilled at the cross, at the resurrection, and the giving of the Spirit. We are one with Christ again. We can dwell with him and pray to him and know him with no more sin. The guilt, the power, and ultimately the presence of sin will be no more. All right, with that said, that's enough for today. Take care, guys. We'll see y'all. Hit the like button if you're here till the end, and share this thing. Ask questions. Appreciate you. Let's keep reading the Bible together. God bless.